Great. Hi everyone, and welcome to this Wooclap training session. I'm very happy to be here with you today to look into a tool that's really going to help you revitalize your classes and put interaction at the heart of your pedagogy. So I know that in the previous context of distance learning, even more interest was expressed in how to interact with students. And I think you'll see just how valuable a tool or Wooclap can be in that context, but also in person to be able to talk to all of your audience. So again, thank you for being here. I know that the semester has just started and you're all busy, but I'm happy to get started with this session. So I'm Kieran, Customer Success Manager at Wooclap, and today I'm joined by my colleagues Julie and Anaïs that'll be there in the chat. You can see Anaïs as well on stage now to give you the keys to succeed in using Wooclap. So throughout this presentation, please feel free to ask your questions and I'll be happy to answer them. So you can ask them in the questions tab or also in the chat, but better in the questions tab, and I'll put some time aside to answer your questions throughout the presentation and at the end. We're also lucky to be joined by Michael Reynolds today, who is going to tell us about his experience using Wooclap as a teacher. Michael is a professor of finance at the Telfer School of Management, which is a part of the University of Ottawa, and he's volunteered to speak at this event, and he assisted in our last open training session. So I think we're all looking very forward to hearing from him at the end of the session today. Welcome, Michael. All right. Oops. So here's a little overview of today's session. I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of context about Wooclap, and right after that, I'll be giving you the opportunity to experience the tool on the participants' end. I'll show you then how to use Wooclap to enhance participation, whether really it's in class or in person. And I'll go over how to create content and which functionalities to activate in favor to really personalize your Wooclap experience. And finally, I'm going to give you. We're going to have Michael Reynolds tell us a bit more about his experience using Wooclap and how it's helped him in his interactions with students in class. Now, just to give you a little bit of context about Wooclap, Wooclap is first and foremost really a pedagogical tool that was founded on cognitive science research from the last decade in order to really rethink the way that we learn. Now, amongst this research upon which Wooclap is founded is the theory of French neuroscientist Stanislas Dehaene, according to whom there are four fundamental pillars of learning, which are first, attention. We know that in order to learn, it's important to be 100% focused. So we know that distractions are going to take away from that focus and ultimately have a negative impact on our learning. So this really brings us to the question of how do I captivate students' attention, but also how do I hold on to and maintain my audience's focus? The second pillar is active engagement. In order to remember new content, it isn't enough to passively listen to the person presenting. It's better to emit your own hypotheses and experiment in order to fully understand new notions and terms. And I think a lot of us saw how difficult it can be in a distance setting, but of course also for many students in person as well. The third pillar is feedback. Feedback, of course, allows you to assess your own learning if and where you made a mistake. And we know that the sooner it comes after the input was given, the more impact it has. And finally, the last pillar is consolidation. In order to learn, one must review content, of course. So we're going to see how Wooclap can be a valuable tool before, during, and after classes. We'll go into more details later on how Wooclap can address all of these pillars. And at this point, I think you've understood that Wooclap will be a great asset to you in creating interactive content that you can then incorporate into your existing presentations. And you can then structure your courses around this interactive content and encourage participation, again, whether it's in person or at a distance. Of course, Wooclap goes further than this, as it will allow you to comment on the input that you're receiving live and also give you access to reports in order to follow students' progress. And I think this is one of the big values as well of using digital tools, is that all of that data that you're collecting can give you insights into students' learning, whether it's on an individual level, but also on a group level, and ultimately give you insights into their learning, but also into maybe where you can adapt the way that you're teaching if you see that multiple groups are struggling at the same place. Now, before I give you a chance to be a student and experience the tool from their end, here are a few resources that we make available to our partners. Of course, there are many tutorials on our YouTube page that you can find, a lot of educational tips available on our blog. We like to talk to different teachers and professors about the ways that they use Wooclap in order to share them with you. And finally, also a help center that's quite thoroughly documented, where you'll find, I'd say, the answers to 90% of the questions that you come across when you start using the tool. Now, without further ado, I'll give you the opportunity to put yourselves in the shoes of the students. And I think you'll find a link in the chat to join the event. Then you can just click on that link. Or you can also scan the QR code that you can see on the left-hand side. All right, thank you all for connecting. As you can see in the bottom right corner, I have visibility on how many people are connected to my event. So I know that today we're around 60, so I'll wait to get up to that number. And then I know that I can move on with the interactive content that I've created. Thank you all for connecting to the event. And again, I'll profit from this moment to remind you that you can ask any of your questions in the question tab or in the chat as well. And I'll be sure to answer them throughout the presentation and have a bit more time at the end as well. All right, great. The number is stabilizing now, so I can move on to the interactive content. And you can, if you join us later, still click on the link. And we're going to start off with the first question. Where are you located on this map? I know we have quite an international group, so it's always nice to see where everyone is connecting from. You can already see quite various answers there. Some in North America, a lot in Europe. Great. Let's see, still quite an international group we have. Again, at the bottom of my screen, I can see how many people have answered out of the total amount of people that are connected. So I always have that view of how many people are left to answer, so I know when I can move on to my next question. So everything is still a few even in Africa, maybe in India almost, it was pinned. Great, nice to see international groups connected to this. And then whenever I'm ready, I can see I have about 50 answers now. I can move on to my next question. Describe your experience working from home in one word. This usually gets quite some different opinions. No, we're not all in the same case when we're working from home. We don't have the same conditions. Some people love it. Some people don't like it as much. So as you can see, as I'm receiving the input, it's changing live on the display that I'm projecting. So the word that's come up the most is comfortable. So it's been made bigger, or interesting at the moment. And I also have the possibility to display my answers in a different format. So I can show them in a grid format or in a list format as well. And then if I wanted to bring one word, for example, to the attention of my class, I can click on it to make it bigger and then go back to my word cloud. So as you can see, maybe it can be hard at some point to comment on a word cloud if it's moving around too much. So whenever I'm ready with all the answers I've collected, I can go ahead and press on the lock at the bottom to lock in my answers so that they become static. And that makes it that much easier then to comment on all the answers that I'm receiving. So I can see the word interesting has come up the most. So whenever a word is coming up multiple times, it's made bigger to reflect the different trends there are in the answers that are given. So this is a really good way. Of course, I wouldn't have been able without a tool to ask 70 people what their experience working from home was. So this is really the value of that digital tool, is I can call on all of my class, all of my audience, and get a real look into their answers and the different trends in that group. So thank you all for your answers to that question. And I'm going to move on to my next question now. Have you ever used Wooclap? So I can get... Again, as you can see, as I'm receiving the answers, they're being displayed live. I can see that most of you have used it, maybe more as participants. We've got some experienced users here as well, but I'm sure that you're still going to find some features and some different insights today that'll be interesting and that'll even make your Wooclap experience even better. Great, thank you all for your answers. Great, and I'll move on to my next slide. So yeah, before we move on to the next part, I think it's also important to quickly remind you or inform you that Wooclap integrates into all of these applications that you can see in tools that you already use. And this is quite important because it's not adding that layer of complexity. It's really allowing you to integrate everything and have everything in the same place and take away from the complexity of what can already be an overwhelming amount of tools to use in some instances. So now that you've had the chance to experience Wooclap from the student's point of view, let's see how you can create your own interactive content and integrate it into your next presentations. All right. Now, this page that you can see here is the first page that you'll arrive on once you've connected to your Wooclap account or created your Wooclap account. So it has all of the events that I've created that I've put in folders here. And the first thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and press on Create Event. Now, one event is considered to be one individual class that you're teaching. So the first thing to do is to rename your event. So for example, if I'm teaching a geography class about South America, I'm just going to rename my event and then confirm that in the top. Then, as you can see, and what really pops up and the first thing that comes to your attention when you're connected to this page are the different questions in the central banner here. So I can go ahead and pick from 17 different question types here by flicking through them. And here, why don't we try out one of our newest questions today, the label on image question. So I'm going to go ahead, so in the central banner, just click on my question. And here I'm going to type in, for example, name the following countries. And then upload an image. So as you can see, I have the instructions that are going to appear at the top for my audience. And then at the bottom, I have image. So for example, the first country to name is Brazil. Second, I'm just going to take the number 2 and put it wherever I want. I'm going to call Colombia. And the third, here, Peru. So I've put in the 3 numbers, placed them on the image I've uploaded, and then I'm going to go ahead and save it. For each question on the right-hand side, you're going to have different features that you can activate. So here I can ignore small errors. So I don't have to, for example, if someone writes Brazil without a capital, it will still count them as having the correct answer. So I'm going to go ahead now and save my question. And as you can see, it appears here under the instructions for a connection. Now I can create a different type of question, for example, a multiple choice question. And what is the capital of Peru? And then underneath, I'm going to type in the different responses that I can allow. So, for example, is it Lima, Paris, or is it Santiago? And then select the correct answer. So again, at the top of the question, and then all of the options that I want to make available to my audience underneath. I can allow on the right-hand side here multiple answers or add a timer, but in this case, that wouldn't make sense as there's only one correct answer. Then I'm going to go ahead and save my question. Now, as you can see, both questions that I've created appear here. I can change their order, and maybe I'm going to try one last question. For example, a poll. I could ask here, do you understand the notion of GDP? Yes, no, or not really. And then save my question. So as you can see, it's just that easy. Selecting the question type in the central banner, clicking on it, configuring it, and then it's going to appear here. Now, if I want to, I can already launch, and we're going to see just how easily I could already launch my event. So by just pressing on start here, I'm going to display the instructions to connect that I'm also adding in the chat. Now, all you have to do is either click on the link in the chat or scan the QR code that you can see on your screen. Thank you all for connecting. I can see there's already 22 people connected. So you see just how easy it was. All I had to do was rename my event, select my question type, type it in, type the different answers possible in this case, and then press on the start button to project it, to project the instructions. So these are just test questions, and you'll have another opportunity to participate later. And I'll get going in just a second with these test questions. Okay, great. So as you can see here, name the following countries. This is our newest question type. And you'll be able to do that on your devices. And again, as you can see at the bottom of my screen, I can see how many answers I've collected out of the total amount of people that are connected. Great, and then whenever I'm ready, and again, you'll have another possibility to connect later. I don't want to spend too much time on these either, because we have some interesting features and also Michael's interesting use cases to hear about. So if you didn't have time to answer now, don't worry, you'll have time later. And whenever I'm ready then, and I'm comfortable with the amount of answers I've collected, I can go ahead and display the correct answers. And I can see here that not everyone got the second one right, and most people got the first, and I can display by just clicking on them for the whole class. 45% got that one correct, 61 got that one correct, and 76 got number 3, Peru, correct. Now, moving on to my second question. What is the capital of Peru? Again, thank you all for participating. I think you could see just how fluid it is and how easy it is to then create your questions, and already I'm commenting on the input of 40 people that are commenting a question I just created a second ago. So it's just a very easy and interactive way of having your students participate and your audience participate. Okay, and then whenever I'm ready, I think this is about the same amount of answers I had in the previous question. I can go ahead and display the correct answer, which is going to be displayed both on my device and yours. And then finally, our last question, maybe I'll keep the last question for the last part, and you'll see why. So perfect. That was the one way of just creating your content by renaming your class, choosing your question here, and then launching it. But of course, as you saw at the beginning of my presentation, I was going from the content that I've created, so my slides, directly into my content that I've created. So this is possible by adding a presentation directly into Wooclap and importing a presentation directly. You can do that here by pressing on Add Presentation or on the right-hand side here. So I'm going to go ahead and import a PowerPoint presentation from my computer. One thing to keep in mind is that when you import a PowerPoint presentation into Wooclap, all of your animations and transitions won't be supported on our website, as it's imported in a PDF format. That being said, there is an add-in that you can use to import your Wooclap questions into PowerPoint. So as you can see now, my PowerPoint presentation is there. And I can go ahead and insert my questions by pressing just underneath on Insert Questions. So this tutorial pops up that's going to show you how to insert your questions, but I'll show you myself for today. As you can see on the left-hand side, I have all the slides of my presentation. And then whenever I'm ready, I can drag and drop the instructions to connect right under slide number 2, for example. And then maybe I want my first question to come in there. And maybe I want my second question to come in after slide number 5. So continue to drag and drop. And the last question between slides 7 and 8. And then all I have to do is press on Save here. And then on the right-hand side still, just under my presentation, is the Start button. And all I have to do is press on Start and go from one slide to another, as I usually would with my keys, and seamlessly go from my presentation directly into the interactive content that we just created together. So just that easily. Now I'm going to check if there are any questions so far. Doesn't seem like there are any questions so far. I think we're good. Perfect. Great. I think my colleagues are doing a great job in the chat and taking care of all your questions. So thanks again to my colleagues for being there. And now we can move on to some different features and interesting settings that are really going to allow you to personalize your Wooclap experience. Now you can see under the presentation that all of my main settings are here. So the first setting that you have here is authentication. So if I activate authentication here, I'm going to require from my students to authenticate in one of these following ways in order to connect to the event that I've created. So I can require them to either connect through email, so they'll have to inform me which is their email, through social. So this is either through Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, or Microsoft, or through SSO if that's been set up with your university. So here I'm not going to activate any of these, but I am going to activate another form of authentication that is, let's say, less formal, which is the participant username. So the participant username authentication method is going to give the participant the possibility to pick his own username, to choose his own username. Things to consider with authentication are that authentication does give you that possibility to have more accountability, first of all, for the input that students are giving, but also gives you then in the grade and report formats that we'll see later, the possibility to see which student is struggling on which question, and it gives you that really personalized approach to it. That being said, maybe you want to deactivate authentication if you really want to free the speech. If students feel like they haven't authenticated, they might communicate more freely. So those are the two things to really just keep in mind when thinking about authentication. So I've activated participant username now. Now the next one that you can see is results visible by default. So as you saw when I was asking the question, for example, the multiple choice question that we had here, what is the capital of Peru? So when I was showing this, as my students were answering, the answers were going up and down, and you could see that 90% of the students that were answering answer number one. You might want to deactivate this option and have the power over when you display the answers collected, just so that students aren't influenced by the answers of others. So I've deactivated it now, and when I have you participate again soon, we'll be able to see just what that looks like. Now, the next setting that you can see is the I'm confused button. So if I activate the I'm confused button, I'm giving students the opportunity on their end, on their interface, to press on a button stating that they're confused. So this is going to appear on the projected screen that I'm showing to the class, and it allows me to assess how many people are confused in my how many people have pressed on that button stating that they're confused in the presentation in my class. And basically, I can have that information without interrupting the flow of my presentation, and I can then get back to that, or to the notion that my students are struggling with, and then ask them, for example, okay, if you're no longer confused, please press on the button again so I can see the number go down. So we'll see again just what that looks like in a second. Now, another way that you can communicate with students in your class is through messages and direct messages. So to do this, in the top left corner under the title and just beside votes, there's a tab called messages. So if I click on this here, I can activate these following settings. So I can activate the wall of messages, I can allow likes, and allow images. So this is going to allow students on their end to send me a message that I can then project to the whole class. These aren't private messages between students and teachers. This is a message and a question that is asked, or a comment that is made for the whole class. And again, we'll be able to see just what that looks like in just a few moments. And finally, before having you participate again, there is the competition mode. So the competition mode, if I activate it, I press here. If I've activated some form of authentication, I can have the possibility to display a podium of the students that have given the most answers, that have collected the most points. This is a way to gamify your course and really play on the competitive side of students, and really snap them back into that active stance, and get them answering and back being active in your class. Now, what I'm going to do is reset my event, which means by pressing on this button at the bottom now and pressing on reset, I'm going to delete all of the answers that I've previously collected on this event. And I'm going to share another link with you in a second. So I can call it test geo. Let's call it 06. So as you just saw here, I can modify and personalize the code of an event if I want to. And I'm going to go ahead and display the instructions so that you can connect just one more time and add. And I've added the link in the chat that you can click on. And now I'm going to check again if we have any questions while I'm waiting. I've tried to do this with Google Slides, and it doesn't seem to work as easy as PowerPoint. Could he show that version? What does this, I'm not sure I understand. So there's a question from Keita Jones, and I'm just not sure if my colleagues could help me clarify what this refers to. Is it integrating questions, probably, maybe? Yes, I can show that maybe a bit later, maybe after at the end of the session. Yeah, I don't have any slides really ready. But also, maybe Anais, at the end of the presentation, maybe you could get on stage and show them if you have anything. We'll see. But we'll be sure to get back to your question. So great. Again, at the bottom of my screen, as you can see, I can see that 40 people, have connected to the event, which is about what I had earlier on. And whenever I'm ready, I can move on back to these questions. Maybe this time we'll have a higher success rate on these questions, hopefully. Practice makes perfect. And I'm going to have you try out this the newest question that we have. Happy to have it and being able to show it to all of you. I see that some of you have already found the messages tab, so don't hesitate to also look on your interface if you can find that messages tab and send in a test message or anything you want to bring to the attention of the group. And then I can display, so I'm going to show you what that looks like. I can display the answers here. So as you can see, I have all these questions, and I've allowed also my audience to like each other's answers. And also don't hesitate to go looking for the I'm confused button. You can see on my interface, it pops up here at the bottom. And then I can move on to showing the answers to this question. So this time I see a higher success rate, 48%, or at least 81% on that one. So that's pretty good. And I can move on to my next question. And I think here you'll see a big difference in the way it's displayed because of the way we've configured the event. So now, as you can see on the left-hand side, I can see that I've received 24 answers out of the 49 total people connected, but they're not being displayed live as they were previously. So this is because we've deactivated results visible by default. And I think you can see that it's helpful in the way that you can't be influenced by the answers of others. I'll give you another second to answer these, and then I'll show you a few more features, and then we'll be hearing from Michael. I'm sure we're all looking forward to it. As you can see here on the left-hand side, then, whenever I'm ready, I have my display options. So when I'm ready, I can display the correct answers. And then the correct answer, which is going to be displayed on all interfaces. And of course, the last feature that we activated and that we want to look into together is now the competition mode. So as you can see here at the bottom, beside my lock and my messages, there's a little trophy. So if I go ahead and press on that trophy here, I can display a podium of all those that have given the most correct answers. So thank you, everyone, for your participation. And I'm just going to check if there are any. So I see someone found this option as well to display. So it's a good way of showing you that you can also send in images. So it's a great way of interacting with your students as well. And I can then, of course, click on any of these messages to bring it to the attention of everyone. And thank you all for your participation. Check one more time if there are any questions. Let's see. Can you prepare a question? Can you duplicate events? I will get to that in just a second. I'll show you how to duplicate events. It's a great question. Is there any possibility to have on the same window the questions to answers and the results? Yeah, I'll get to all these questions in just a second. I think now I'm just going to show you the report and the grid format. Now, let's see. So as you saw, and as I said previously, I required some form of authentication here, which really gives me, I think, full access to really the value of using digital tools. So all of these results that I've collected, I can export into an Excel file if I want to keep it on hand, or if I want to further analyze everything that I've collected. I can visualize everything in a grid format. So again, I've pressed on grid here at the bottom, and you can see I have a line per line item of each person and all of the answers that they've given. So this has given me that individual insight into each student and their learning. But I might also want to know how the learning was on a class level, so I know how to adapt the extra resources that I want to send after, maybe the preparation, I want to go over something again in the next class. But I also think it gives you insight into also the way that you're teaching, maybe where students are struggling in general. If you see that in multiple classes, maybe, if it had been the other way around in this question, for example, if 90% of the students got it wrong, and you saw that that's something that happened in multiple classes, then you would have that insight into your classes and thinking, maybe I should change the way that I teach this, or maybe I need to go slower, go over this again. So it's really giving you that insight both into the learning of your students, but also the way that your class is constructed, and it's input that you can get outside of exams as well. So thank you all for that. And this was all for the live part of Wooclap. But as you remember at the beginning of the class, I was telling you how Wooclap can be a valuable tool before, during, and after classes. And right now I'm going to show you how you can use Wooclap asynchronously. Now, by going into the participant pace tab under my title again, into the tab participant pace here, you're going to see the two buttons that appear. So here I can decide to make some files available to my students. I'm going to go ahead and upload a file, for example. And then I can decide to publish it now or later. And I can create a questionnaire as well. So here I can import questions from any of my previous events. So for example, looking into the event I just created, if everyone had gotten maybe the answer to this question wrong, maybe I would want to import that question into this event so that my students, and then send it to my students so that they could go over that content again. Then I could create questions in the same way that we just did. And then when I press on save, oh, my mistake, I forgot to rename, so I could call it revision geography, and then just confirm. And then when I save my event, I can either publish it now or later. I've pressed on later here. And once it's published, all I have to do is copy this link here, send it to my students. And as I receive all of their input, I'm going to be able to visualize it here in the grid or report the same way we did here on the right-hand side. And I'm going to have that visibility and those insights into students' learning and the groups learning, the classes learning as well. So that was it for the use of Wooclap, both live and asynchronously. Maybe I'll go into one question before going into, so I know there was one question about sharing events, and I think that's a really good question. There are two ways you can share events at the moment. So by going, sorry, that was a bit fast. Here on the right-hand side, by going into more settings, I have the possibility when I scroll down to press on share this event with another user by giving them the code. So if I activate this and then press on save at the bottom, I can share this code at the top with my colleague. And when he's on the main page here, all he has to do is press on import event, use that code, press on import, and he'll have created a copy of your event. I'm gonna go back. Another way you can share an event with a colleague is by adding him as a collaborator on your event. This is not available to everyone. There's an article about it in our Help Center as well that'll further inform you on the different possibilities of this collaboration option. Now, I think that was quite a thorough way, or quite a simple look into Wooclap, into the functionalities. But you can see that there are a lot of ways of personalizing your experience with it. But I think it's also important that we hear from our users and not just us Wooclappers. And I think this is a good moment to maybe have Michael tell us about some of the ways that he's used Wooclap, and he's a success story, as he was in our previous open training session, and today he's here to tell you about the way that he's using Wooclap. So Michael, thanks again for being with us, and I'll let you introduce yourself and maybe tell us a bit about how you've used Wooclap.
Great. Can you hear me, Kieran?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, let me say that I find using tools like Wooclap it's like a craft. The more I do it, the better I can use it. And I think I'll be using it better post this 45 minutes we've been talking than I would have before. But in any event, thank you very much, Kieran. Could you give me the next slide, please?
Of course.
Okay, so I have a PowerPoint. I always talk to PowerPoint slides because I have a tendency to ramble at length and go off on tangents. So there'll be a PowerPoint slide for each of these items. Could we have the next slide, please?
Of course.
So I'm a part-time prof at Telfer, which is the business school at the University of Ottawa. I've been teaching for far too long, and this term I'm teaching 3 sections of the same course. It's a 4th year finance course. Essentially, it's the capstone course in the finance program. 2 of the sessions are in person and 1's virtual. Next slide, please. So I'm an old man and with very little aptitude for technology, and I think I'd be a poster person for if I can use Wooclap, anybody can. And if you go to the next slide. In order that I started to get familiar, and now I'm using it in all my classes, University of Ottawa has got a support group for teachers, for profs, that's just excellent. So they sort of introduced it to me. Our School of Business hired a consultant who actually got me going with using the technology. And I've got great TAs that can quickly work out any problem I can't. As crazy as it sounds, I couldn't figure out how to reset my slides, and my TA figured it out in about 25 seconds. So the reason I use Wooclap, I've used other interactive platforms, is because it's incredibly engaging, easy to follow, and the feedback from the students, as I'll talk about in a sec, is they really enjoy it, to the point that they're asking me why I'm not doing something in the middle of the class that I may have done in other classes. Next slide, please. So I use Wooclap as an engagement tool. I know that I'm not a great lecturer, and after 8 to 10 minutes, the attention span starts to drop. So I'll have a number of techniques, and Wooclap is one of them, to reset the attention span, and also to better understand the student experience at the university and life as a whole. If I was teaching a different course, like next term I'm going to be teaching introductory finance, student comprehension and recording participation will be factors I'll blend into it. But this 4th year course, anybody taking the course is really committed to finance. They know it's a hard course, and I don't have to worry about participation. And I don't have much concern about comprehension. So at the moment, though, just after listening to the talk today, I'm going to blend in a few more of the tools. I've been using the word cloud, the multiple choice, and the polls. And these are a few examples of how I use it. So You remember the objective is to reset attention span. So with the 3 sections, I asked students, what's your favorite beverage? This particular class said sangria, one class said beer, and one class said water, which after the following day with lectures, I just asked student, which group would you want to party with? Anything to reset attention span. Next one, please. And so I did these sort of not finance related questions a number of times. And in the middle of the last day of lectures, I forgot to do this. So students said, oh, where are we going to have the interesting chart? So I put this one up, and Taylor Swift's, there wasn't a big reaction to this one. There's 22 of about roughly 40 students. But it was interesting that they actually assured me that they weren't putting names like Elton John, Queen, Fleetwood Mac, David Bowie. One person put me, which I thought was certainly a very wise student, but anything again to reset the attention span. Next slide, please. So then as I started to get better at it, and I think I'll be better using Wooclap 6 weeks from now, much better than I am today, and I think I'll be better next week than I am today. But blending this into my lecture, all my students have to do evaluation of a company that trades on the stock exchange. 95% of them are trading on New York or Toronto. And this blend, now I'm starting to get better at it. So the last class, I asked students to tell me what's the rating of their firm. And from this word cloud event or usage, it blended really well into the rest of the lecture. And again, it had the aspect of resetting attention span. They had to go, everybody brings their laptop or to class, and they really in my class, you can't be interactive with me on a phone. It's just, a lot of the apps don't give enough information. While if you access the same app on your laptop, you get more information. In any event, this one served 2 purposes. It reset the attention span, and it blended really well into what we're going to do next, which generated lots of questions. So how come I can't find my firm? How come Lululemon doesn't have a credit rating? Well, they're so cash rich, they don't need one. Next slide, please. And that's just an example of a poll, which I often use. Do you understand what we did? And I can predict the answers to the pools because I've taught this course over 20 times, but it resets attention span. And the next one, please. And that's just an example. This might have been the first or second lecture, just a very basic question to see if they'd remembered any of the principles they'd learned in previous finance courses. So again, I think that's about it. Once you set the objective, and I'm sure you folks are better at this than I am, of why you want to use the poll, it's really good. Now I use essentially the same polls whether I'm doing it in person or virtually. And I get, to be frank with you, I get better results from the virtual class than I get from the in-person class. The in-person class, I have to give some gentle encouragement to actually answer the poll. But in any event, that's essentially my experience in a nutshell. Thank you for having the opportunity to talk to you folks.
Thank you so much, Michael. It was really lovely to hear from you. And again, success story to hear that you were at the last open training session and that you're now talking to everyone and telling them about how you use Wooclap. Yeah, thanks for being with us today. I think it's interesting what you say, and it's sort of what ties into what I was saying at the beginning. But yeah, attention of the students is important to maintain that attention, to captivate their attention, but maintain it as well. And engaging them really snaps them back into that active stance as opposed to that passive stance of only listening to the lecture. So some great examples. And I'm going to check now in our tab if there are any questions for us. I don't know if Anais maybe wanted to answer one of the questions on Google Slides, or if anyone wanted to answer a question on Google Slides. Let me see. What time does it? This is a question for you, Michael, actually.
Sure.
How much time does it take you to create your interactive content that you then incorporate for each class?
Well, first of all, I love doing this stuff, so I have to pay a lot of attention that I don't let the preparing the Wooclap slides overtake the content and the lecture. What I do is I'm just in the process of doing this for a class this afternoon, which hopefully I'll get it done before the class, or we won't have as many. What I do is I put together my PowerPoint packages, and usually there's somewhere between 4 and 8 different PowerPoint packages. And once I get that done, then I go through them and see where I might be able to build a poll, a word cloud, or a multiple choice question in. And that's how I approach it. So it'd probably take me about 15 minutes to half an hour max to build up the questions. So hopefully that addresses it. But what I first figure out is what I'm going to say, and then I get the Wooclap to support, again, to reset attention spans. And now I'm getting better at it to actually help with the learning experience of what we're doing.
Okay.
Once you get good at it, it takes a. You
Exactly.
saw how fast Kieran made that poll. Well, I can probably do it. If it took him 45 seconds, I can probably do it in a minute and a half or 2 now.
That's perfect. I'm sure you'll get better every time. And there's another question about your favorite question types. I think you had mentioned that you used mostly word cloud, polling, and multiple choice. That's correct.
Yeah, my favorite one, and please appreciate, I'm no expert at this. I've been doing it, now I'm into my 5th week doing it. What I'm going to do towards the end of October is ask the students what do they prefer and get feedback from them, because the whole thing is about student experience. At the moment, just from the buzz in the classroom, the word cloud, if I put up a poll or a multiple choice question, there's no buzz at all. If I put up a word cloud, all of a sudden, you give the student a minute or 2 to respond. There's a buzz. People start talking to each other, and I'm running at about 80% to 90% participation rate.
Okay.
So I think the buzz isn't talking about last night's NFL football game, or if they're real football, soccer fans, about the Premier Division, or how badly Barcelona's doing, or PSG lost on the weekend. I don't think they're talking about that. I actually think they're talking about what they're going to put into the word cloud. Right.
No, absolutely. That's great. And I saw some different question types that you were using, but I think, also if you want to get your students' input on their understanding, you can also use a rating question. I was thinking this, and you could say, rate on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you understand this notion? And then your students would be able to rate that on a scale of 1 to 5. Going back to that slide where you were asking your students about how much they understood of the class.
That's great. Like I said, this is a craft, and right now I know a lot more than I did when I started, so I'll be using the others. And I also always have to make sure that I keep in mind I'm teaching finance. That's the objective, not learning how to use Wooclap. It's the support, not to, but anyway, that's great. Thank you very much.
Of course, my pleasure. I see there's another question here. How to launch an event. So if I understand correctly, and you can tell me in the chat, you would like to see again how I could insert questions and launch them? I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and you can stop me if I'm showing something. It's useless. So as you remember, we created our questions by picking them in the central banner here. And then I inserted a presentation by just uploading it here. I can also add Google Slides by adding a link here. So I've just upload my presentation, and then it appears here on the right-hand side. So then by just going underneath into insert questions and clicking, I'm going to see all of my slides appear on the left-hand side, and my questions appear on my right-hand side. And then all I have to do is drag and drop the connection instructions, drag and drop the first question wherever I want it to appear in my presentation. And then I can press on save. Once that's done, all I have to do to launch my presentation is press on start button here. And then as you can see, I can go from my content to my slides just as I please using the keys of my keyboard. I hope that was the question, if I understood it correctly. I think so. And yeah, just a few words to conclude. Thank you all. Maybe I'll put up a last, maybe word cloud. I can launch that. So yeah, I think one thing is thank you all for your presence and participation today. And I hope that the session was of value to you, and that you're already thinking of what interactive questions you'll integrate into your next presentations. Of course, we recommend taking some time, in the next days or weeks to create some questions on the platform and apply some of the notions, of course, that we went over today. I think, as you saw, Wooclap's an intuitive tool, so don't hesitate to just play around with it and try it out with a colleague or a family member. Why not? And in the next hours, you're going to receive an email with a replay of this webinar, as well as some extra helpful resources to apply our learnings today, and as well as a form that you can complete in order to receive a Wooclap training certificate. And this certificate will attest that you've participated in a training session. So please feel free to also share it with your school, your colleagues, or on social media. And again, thank you all for being here. I'll display this in a word cloud. Thank you all for being here, and I'd like to thank Michael one more time for telling us about how he's been using Wooclap, and as well as all my colleagues that are present in the chat, answering all of your questions. I have one more minute to send in your words, and then the event will be closed.
Thank you much, Kieran. We'll catch up later.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Michael.
Bye.
Bye.